Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 649. I had the white pieces and played knight f3, and my opponent plays the unusual move knight to c6. You see it's way down on the list of possible moves. And well, this is kind of exposing a weakness of mine. Well, I like to play these different openings, and I don't necessarily know them all that well, particularly the sideline. So I started playing this knight f3 after I saw Chess Explained having some good luck with it, and I've been sort of learning it on the fly. I think if we back up, if black plays knight f6 or d5 or c5, I think I probably know what to do, or even g6 going into some kind of symmetrical position would be okay. But against knight c6, I didn't really know what to do. Looking at this later, I think a good reply here might be something like d4. And just go for a queen's pawn opening, just switch tracks and hope to prove that this knight is a little bit misplaced. Although black can play something like a Chigorin defense by pushing the d pawn forward and bringing the bishop out to g4. So black should be okay here. It's not like there's anything especially wrong with that knight move. But that would be the way to play this. Let's see. In this position, I just continued on with my Reti setup, which I guess is still okay. But after e5, I should really do something about the threat of pushing that pawn to e4. The top move here in the database here is to play e4 myself, just mechanically stopping that pawn from coming forward. And we've transposed in some kind of king's pawn opening. I could play this like a king's Indian attack. That would also be a reasonable way to play this. But I just continued with this Reti setup, bishop g2. And now I'm actually in trouble. If he were to push on with e4, that would actually kind of embarrass the knight. If the knight goes to h4, then black can play d6, and then there's no squares for that knight. The knight is in danger of being trapped there. So black gets a lot of free moves while I'm trying to find a way to save my knight from there's an immediate threat of g5 winning the knight. So actually the best move suggested by the chess engine here is to retreat the knight back to g1. So basically by playing like this, I've given black a few free tempos and an advanced pawn, which he probably needs to defend with something like d5 or knight f6. Anyway, a good position for black with the lead in development. So that's what I bent about, not knowing this opening that well. So fortunately for me, my opponent just pushed on with f5 here, and we're just out of the opening book after that move. So this is setting up a reverse Grand Prix attack, which actually this knight here is part of that setup. The knight defends the e-pawn and prevents pawn to d4. And this setup is usually played with white against black with the Sicilian, where it's known as the Grand Prix attack. So we'll call this the reverse Grand Prix, although I haven't played the Sicilian move c5, but I get there eventually. c4. Let's see, in this case. I start with d3 because I'd begun to recognize there was a threat of that pawn being pushed forward. Now I have another square for my knight to go to, and I can also trade off the pawn if it comes forward. Let's see. And he played bishop d7. I go c4. So I've completed this Reti-like setup where I've got good control over the light squares. And this everything is fine at this point, since my opponent didn't take advantage of my sloppy play earlier. And white is slightly better in this kind of position. Let's see, he goes knight f6. I go knight c3. He castles, and I should probably just castle as well. The Grand Prix attack is not so dangerous that you really have to worry about it. But I was delaying castling and experimenting with other ideas here, getting the bishop out. What I was really thinking about is trying to counter the action on the wing with the action in the center, which is often a recipe. And I can, I guess, think of castling queenside in some cases, but I never got around to it. And actually, I get into trouble once again here, although we'll see. I take off the knight, he takes back, and I get my knight into the center. So that was the idea with that bishop g5. I didn't mind that he kicked it because I was going to trade it off for that knight and get a good post for my knight. So he played d6, opening up a line for his bishop, and I played b4. And this is where I really should have castled. So b4 is a mistake. And well, this is, let's see if you can spot the tactic here. I want to say it's a little more complicated than I thought at first. So there's kind of a surface tactic that you should see, and then see if you can spot White's response, and then figure out how it might continue from there. So it's kind of a calculation exercise. Okay, pause the video now if you want some time to think about it. I'm giving the answer away. The tactic, the surface tactic is e4. Just push that pawn forward, open up this diagonal for the bishop hitting the rook, and simultaneously attacking the knight. So it's a double attack, which looks pretty dangerous at first, but White has the response, knight takes f6 with check. So because that goes with check, I can escape the double attack. Queen takes here, and then I could move the knight away. But it's not that simple. In fact, black is better here. And I'll give one example, which is, suppose I trade off the pawn first, which I might do without thinking if I wasn't thinking too far ahead. And here maybe you spot the problem. Now I have to move the knight. If I don't, well, I should. If I don't move the knight, I'm going to lose it. But if I do move the knight, then that's a checkmate. So this is why I should have castled before pushing on with b4 there. Now that's not the best play. So White doesn't have to lose here. He can move the knight immediately, and then black takes on d3, and now White can castle and just be a pawn down. And so that's the outcome. If you take the pawn, that's also let's see. There's various winning lines here. The b pawn is hanging, for one thing, so we could just grab a pawn that way. Anyway, yeah, there was another interesting line, but I've forgotten it now. So let's go back. But that was the tactic, and maybe he spotted that idea and thought, well, I would just take the bishop, and that would be the end of it. But when the queen takes back, there's pressure with the queen and the rook battery, and there's the pawn is disrupting my center here, and my king hasn't castled. So it's good to push on with e4 there. Anyway, he pushed on with f4 instead, kind of a typical idea with the Grand Prix attack. But this is okay. I can castle now, and everything is fine. He plays knight e7, trying to harass my knight, and I didn't find anything better than just trading it off for the bishop. He takes with the rook, keeping some pressure on the f-file. I go knight d2, but White is okay in all of this. Let's see, he goes queen e8. I go knight e4. I'm repositioning my knight with a little tempo against the rook. He drops back, and I play d4. And that's one of the key ideas against the Grand Prix, is to push that d pawn forward and trade off some of those central pawns to try and weaken the attack. Let's see, he goes knight f5. I trade. And then I play queen to d3. Get my queen off the back rank so my rooks can come over. Let's see, he plays bishop to e6. I go knight to c5, hitting his bishop, hitting the pawn. And he goes rook to d8, hitting my queen. So I step aside. And then he hops in with knight to d4. And so I was alert enough at this point. I was alert enough to notice the threat. Although I almost just grabbed that pawn, or grabbed the bishop. I was trying to decide what was better. But I did notice eventually that he has this threat of taking on e2 with the fork of the king and the queen. So that's pretty annoying. So I brought the rook over to defend, and also had the idea of pushing my e-pawn forward and chasing that knight away, because it's dangerous to allow a knight to hang around your your king side like this. They can hop into these key squares f3 and e2 with check at any moment, and also the f-file is about to be opened up, it looks like. Let's see, he played b6 to kick my knight, so I traded off the knight for the bishop, and he took. And then I played e3. So far, so good. I'm actually still okay in this position. It's the next move. He takes here. It's the next move where I get into trouble. And well, you saw what happened in the game, but other outcomes are not so great either. But let's show what I should have played. If I just take with the rook, I'm okay. In fact, I'm a little better here. I'm guarding all these squares at the moment that his knight can hop into. I can get some pressure against his isolated pawn, and I have these advanced pawns on the queen side that I can push forward and maybe create weaknesses over here. So slight edge to white in this position. Instead, I took with the pawn, and this had been part of my idea, was to use that pawn to chase the knight away, get him out of that square. And also I wanted these exchanges on the f-file, because that's another way to defuse the Grand Prix attack, is to open up the f-file and exchange off the rooks, and the attack kind of disappears here. So anyway, when he took, I took back with the rook, and then I surrendered after he threw in the fork. So I just had momentarily forgotten about that fork, which I had spotted a little while earlier. But well, actually, this is a tricky position. After f takes e3, rook takes f1. If I take with the bishop, and he's got this fork, so the only way I can take is with the king, and then he gets onto the f-file with tempo, and oh, this is the line I was thinking of. Yeah, and then the queen can penetrate to c2. I had this memory of queen c2, and that was the line I was thinking of. And this is kind of an annoying move. He still hasn't moved his knight. Notice all of that. Well, this is an engine line at this point, but the chess engine is being pretty clever, maintaining that knight there long enough to support the queen coming into c2. And if I trade, then knight takes c2, and it's a fork. So it seems like in all of these lines, black is better. This is maybe the best line for white. And the knight is also hitting the rook. So black is going to win a pawn, and white will have to play on a pawn down, although maybe with some play against this pawn. So it's not like it's lost at this point, but black is definitely better. And the point is here, if I move the rook to defend the b pawn, he grabs the e pawn. So anyway, it would all be a little bit it'd all be a bit tricky for me after that point. So really the mistake was taking with the pawn instead of the rook. Okay, but let's just put the final position on the board. I took with the pawn, he took the rook. I took back with the rook because I wanted a rook on the f-file, and I had just forgotten about that fork, and so I resigned here. So anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys liked this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.